Welcome to Stoic Vivu, where we make ancient wisdom practical for modern life. I'm here to help you build unshakable mental strength using time-tested principles that have guided people through chaos for over 2,000 years. Our mission is simple. Take the profound teachings of ancient Stoic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, and show you exactly how to apply them to the real challenges you face every single day. Right now, you're living through one of the most mentally demanding periods in human history. You wake up to notifications screaming for your attention. You scroll through social media and see anger, division, and chaos everywhere you look. You turn on the news and watch the world seemingly fall apart in real time. At work, you deal with difficult people who seem impossible to reason with. In your personal life, you face uncertainty about the future, anxiety about things beyond your control, and the constant pressure to keep up with a world that never stops moving. Can feel overwhelming. Can feel like the whole world has gone insane, and you're fighting just to stay sane yourself. You're not imagining this pressure. The challenges you face are real, and they're more intense than what most generations before us experienced. But here's what I want you to understand. The feelings you're experiencing, the struggles you're facing, the mental battles you're fighting, none of this is new. 2,000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius ruled the Roman Empire during plague, war, and political upheaval. He dealt with betrayal, incompetent people in positions of power, and a society that often seemed to reward the worst behavior. Yet in his private journal, which we now call Meditations, he developed mental practices that kept him grounded, focused, and virtuous despite the chaos around him. Seneca navigated the dangerous politics of imperial Rome, where saying the wrong thing could cost you your life. Epictetus overcame slavery and physical disability to become one of history's most influential teachers of mental resilience. These weren't people living in peaceful times writing theoretical philosophy. They were human beings facing real problems, developing practical tools for mental strength that actually worked under pressure. And the beautiful thing is, their insights are just as relevant today as they were then. In fact, they might be more relevant now than ever. Today, you're going to learn 11 powerful practices that will help you stay mentally strong no matter how chaotic the world becomes. You'll discover how to guard your mind against information overload, find peace with people who drive you crazy, master anxiety by focusing on what you actually control, and turn every challenge into an opportunity for growth. These aren't just feel-good concepts, they're battle-tested strategies that will change how you respond to stress, conflict, and uncertainty. By the end of this journey, you'll have a complete toolkit for mental resilience. You'll know how to stay calm when everything feels out of control, maintain your standards when others don't, and develop the kind of unshakable strength that no external circumstance can touch. Let's begin building that strength together. 1. How to guard your mind against information overload. You're sitting at your desk, coffee in hand, opening your laptop to start the day. But before you can even think about your actual work, you're bombarded. 37 unread emails, 14 news notifications. Your phone buzzes with breaking news alerts, social media updates, and messages from coworkers about the latest crisis that apparently needs your immediate attention. By 9 a.m., your mind is already scattered in 17 different directions, and you haven't accomplished a single meaningful thing. This scenario plays out millions of times every morning across America, and it's not accidental. What you're experiencing is a modern form of warfare, not the kind fought with weapons, but with information. The ancient Stoics never faced Twitter or cable news, but they understood something crucial about mental discipline that applies perfectly to our digital age. Your mind is your most valuable possession, and you must guard it as fiercely as you would guard your home. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "Be like the rocky headland on which the waves constantly break. It stands unmoved, and the boiling waters around it fall to rest." He was talking about exactly what you face every morning: the endless waves of information, opinions, and noise that crash against your consciousness, trying to sweep you away from what actually matters. Here's what the Stoics understood that most people today have forgotten. There's a difference between being informed and being overwhelmed. There's a difference between staying connected and losing your center. And there's definitely a difference between consuming information and being consumed by it. Seneca, who served as advisor to Emperor Nero during one of Rome's most turbulent periods, developed what we might call the principle of selective attention. He wrote, "Nothing, Lucilius, is ours except time. We were entrusted by nature with the ownership of this single thing, so fleeting and slippery that anyone who will take it from us. Every minute you spend consuming irrelevant information is a minute stolen from your actual life, your real priorities, your meaningful work." But how do you apply this ancient wisdom to your modern reality? Start with what Seneca called the morning reflection. Before you check your phone, before you open your laptop, before you dive into the digital noise, spend 5 minutes asking yourself 3 questions. What are my most important priorities today? What information do I actually need to accomplish these priorities? What can I safely ignore without any real consequence? This isn't about becoming uninformed or disconnected from the world. It's about becoming strategic with your attention. Think of your mind like a smartphone battery. Every notification, every news alert, every piece of information you consume drains that battery a little bit. The question isn't whether you can afford to consume all this information. The question is whether you can afford not to be selective about it. Consider this approach. Instead of starting your day by checking what everyone else thinks you should know about, start by reviewing what you actually need to accomplish. Instead of letting news websites and social media algorithms decide what deserves your attention, you decide. This is what Epictetus meant when he taught about the discipline of desire, learning to want what leads to your flourishing rather than simply wanting whatever is put in front of you. The Stoics also understood something that modern neuroscience has confirmed. Your brain can only focus on one thing at a time with real depth and quality. When you're constantly switching between different streams of information, you're not actually multitasking, you're attention switching, and every switch costs you mental energy and focus. Here's a practical exercise rooted in Stoic philosophy. Create what we might call information boundaries. Just as you wouldn't let strangers walk into your house anytime they wanted, don't let information into your mind without permission. Designate specific times for checking news, specific times for email, and specific times for social media. Outside those times, your mind belongs to your priorities, not to whoever is shouting the loudest online. Marcus Aurelius practiced something he called the view from above, regularly stepping back to see the bigger picture rather than getting caught up in immediate dramas. Apply this to information consumption. Before clicking on that breaking news story or engaging with that heated social media debate, ask yourself, will this matter a month from now? Will engaging with this information help me become a better person or accomplish something meaningful? The goal isn't to become ignorant or isolated. The goal is to become sovereign over your own attention. When you control what information gets into your mind, you control the quality of your thoughts. When you control the quality of your thoughts, you control the quality of your day. And when you control the quality of your days, you control the quality of your life. Remember, every piece of information you consume shapes you in some small way. The ancient Stoics believed that wisdom meant choosing influences that make you more virtuous, more rational, and more capable of contributing something valuable to the world. In our age of infinite information, that choice has never been more important or more challenging. Ultimately, guarding your mind against information overload isn't about building walls. It's about building filters. You want to let in what nourishes your growth and keeps out what merely feeds your anxiety. This is the foundation of mental strength in a chaotic world. 2. Your sacred mission in times of uncertainty. You're watching the evening news, and every story seems designed to make you feel like the world is spinning out of control. Political scandals, economic uncertainty, social division, environmental crises. It's an endless parade of problems that feel too big for any individual to solve. You turn off the television feeling helpless, maybe even a little hopeless. You find yourself wondering, what's the point of trying to be good when everything around me seems so broken? What difference can one person really make? This feeling of powerlessness in the face of massive, systemic problems is not unique to our time. Marcus Aurelius ruled the Roman Empire during what historians call the crisis of the 3rd century, a period of plague, warfare, economic collapse, and political instability that threatened the very foundations of civilization. Yet in his private writings, he never expressed despair or gave up on his duty to remain virtuous. Instead, Marcus Aurelius wrote something that should resonate deeply with anyone living through uncertain times. In the morning when you rise unwillingly, let this thought be present: I am rising to the work of a human being. What do I have to complain of if I am going to do the things for which I exist and for which I was brought into the world? This wasn't naive optimism or blind faith. This was a man who understood something profound about personal responsibility that most people miss. Your primary obligation during chaos is not to fix everything that's broken in the world. Your primary obligation is not to become part of the brokenness yourself. Think about it this way. Imagine you're a lighthouse keeper during a violent storm. Ships are being tossed around by massive waves, visibility is nearly zero, and the wind is howling so loudly you can barely think. Your job isn't to calm the storm. That's beyond your power. Your job isn't to single-handedly rescue every ship in distress. That's beyond your capability. Your job is to keep your light burning brightly so that others can navigate safely through the darkness. This is what Epictetus meant when he taught that we must focus on what is up to us versus what is not up to us. The political dysfunction you see on the news? Not up to you. The economic uncertainty is affecting millions of people. Not up to you. The social divisions tearing communities apart? Not up to you. But your response to these challenges, your character, your integrity, your commitment to virtue, that is entirely up to you. Seneca, who lived through the reign of Emperor Nero, one of history's most notorious tyrants, understood this principle deeply. He wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Even in the darkest times, even when institutions fail and systems collapse, there are always people quietly doing the right thing, maintaining their principles, and preparing the foundation for whatever comes next. Here's the practical application. Instead of asking, "How can I fix the world?" start asking, "How can I fulfill my role as a human being today?" Instead of feeling overwhelmed by problems you can't control, focus intensely on the responsibilities you can meet. Instead of despairing about the future, concentrate on living with integrity in the present moment. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent to suffering or withdrawing from civic engagement. The Stoics believed strongly in contributing to the common good. But they understood that the most powerful contribution you can make is to model the behavior you want to see in the world. When you remain calm during a crisis, you give others permission to stay calm. When you maintain your principles under pressure, you demonstrate that principles can be maintained under pressure. When you treat difficult people with dignity, you prove that dignity is possible even in undignified times. Marcus Aurelius called this the discipline of action, the practice of doing what needs to be done without being attached to outcomes you can't control. You show up for your family even when the economy is uncertain. You do excellent work even when your industry is changing. You treat your neighbors with kindness even when political rhetoric is harsh. You tell the truth even when lies seem more convenient. Consider this perspective. Uncertainty has always been the human condition. Every generation has faced challenges that seemed insurmountable. Every era has had people convinced that their particular moment in history was uniquely difficult or hopeless. Yet here we are, the beneficiaries of countless individuals who chose to remain committed to virtue despite the chaos of their times. Your sacred mission during uncertain times is not to be a hero in some grand public sense. It's to be reliable, principled, and steady in all the small daily ways that actually hold society together. When you keep your commitments, honor your responsibilities, and maintain your integrity regardless of external circumstances, you become part of the solution rather than part of the problem. This is what Seneca meant when he wrote, "Be what you wish others to become." The world doesn't need you to solve every problem. It needs you to be the kind of person whose existence makes things a little better, a little more hopeful, a little more human. Building on this foundation of personal responsibility, we can now explore how to apply these principles when dealing with the specific people who test our commitment to virtue most severely. 3. How to find peace with unchangeable people. You walk into the office Monday morning, and there's Janet from accounting already complaining loudly about something that happened over the weekend. She's the type of person who finds fault with everything, treats service workers rudely, and somehow manages to make every conversation about herself. You've tried being kind to her. You've tried setting boundaries. You've even tried having a direct conversation about her behavior. Nothing changes. She is who she is, and every interaction leaves you feeling drained, frustrated, and questioning your own sanity. Sound familiar? We all have people like this in our lives. Family members who push our buttons, coworkers who seem incapable of basic consideration, neighbors who make unreasonable demands. The natural human response is to keep trying to change them, to get them to see reason, to somehow make them understand how their behavior affects others. But what if I told you that this approach is not only futile but actually harmful to your own peace of mind? Marcus Aurelius, who dealt with his share of difficult personalities in the Roman Senate, wrote something that might initially sound harsh but is actually deeply liberating. You can hold your breath until you turn blue, but they'll still go on doing it. He wasn't being cynical. He was being realistic about human nature and offering you a path to freedom. Here's what the Stoics understood that modern psychology has confirmed. Most people's core personality traits and behavioral patterns are remarkably stable throughout their adult lives. That doesn't mean people can't grow or improve, but it does mean that the fundamental way someone approaches the world, their level of consideration for others, their emotional regulation, their basic values, these things rarely change dramatically, especially not because someone else wants them to. This insight isn't meant to make you pessimistic about humanity. It's meant to free you from the exhausting cycle of expecting people to be different than they are. When you truly accept that Janet from accounting is going to complain, that your brother-in-law is going to make inappropriate comments at family dinners, that your neighbor is going to blast music at inappropriate hours, something remarkable happens. You stop taking their behavior personally. Epictetus, who understood human nature from his experience as both a slave and a teacher, explained this principle beautifully. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. The difficult person in your life isn't happening to you. They're just happening. They're being who they are, doing what they do, following the patterns they've always followed. Your suffering comes not from their behavior, but from your resistance to accepting their behavior as part of reality. But acceptance doesn't mean resignation or becoming a doormat. It means shifting your energy from trying to change what you cannot change to managing what you can change. Your own response. When you accept that some people are going to be difficult, you can plan accordingly. You can set appropriate boundaries, limit your exposure when possible, and most importantly, protect your own emotional equilibrium. Consider this reframe. Instead of seeing difficult people as personal attacks on your happiness, start seeing them as opportunities to practice virtue. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "How much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, but only to what he does himself." Every interaction with a challenging person becomes a chance to practice patience, compassion, or assertiveness without attachment to outcomes. Seneca offered another powerful perspective on this challenge. He suggested that difficult people are actually gifts, and not because their behavior is pleasant, but because they force us to develop qualities we might not otherwise cultivate. Dealing with an unreasonable person teaches you patience. Encountering someone who lacks empathy helps you appreciate the empathetic people in your life. Managing your response to criticism or hostility builds emotional resilience. Here's a practical approach rooted in Stoic philosophy. When you encounter behavior that triggers frustration, pause and ask yourself 3 questions. First, is this person likely to change their fundamental behavior based on my response? Usually, the honest answer is no. Second, what would I do in this situation if I were committed to responding with virtue regardless of the outcome? This shifts your focus from controlling them to controlling yourself. Third, how can I protect my own peace while still meeting my obligations in this relationship? This last question is crucial because acceptance doesn't mean allowing yourself to be mistreated. You can accept that someone is consistently inconsiderate while also choosing to minimize your interactions with them. You can accept that a family member is going to create drama while also deciding not to engage with that drama. You can accept that a coworker is unreliable while also protecting your own projects from their unreliability. The Stoics called this the discipline of desire, learning to want reality to be what it actually is rather than what you think it should be. When you stop wanting difficult people to be different, you stop suffering from the gap between your expectations and reality. This understanding naturally leads us to examine another source of mental turmoil, our tendency to worry about things beyond our control. for Master Anxiety by Building Your Circle of Power. You're lying in bed at 2 a.m., your mind racing through tomorrow's presentation, next month's mortgage payment, and what your boss meant by that comment in the meeting. Your heart is beating faster, your stomach is tight, and sleep feels impossible. You think about the economy, your aging parents, your kids' future, and a dozen other concerns that feel enormous and urgent. Each worry feeds the next one until you're completely overwhelmed by everything that could go wrong, everything you need to fix, everything that's uncertain about the future. This is the modern anxiety spiral, and if you've experienced it, you're not alone. But here's what might surprise you. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the ancient world, wrote in his private journal about having exactly the same experience. He described days when anxiety felt overwhelming, when he worried about things beyond his control, when his mind created elaborate scenarios of potential disaster. The difference is that Marcus Aurelius discovered something that transformed his relationship with anxiety completely. He wrote, "I had a good day today because I escaped anxiety. Actually, no, I discarded it because it was within me, not outside me." This insight that anxiety exists within us, rather than in external circumstances, is the foundation for mastering worry and building what the Stoics called your circle of power. Let me help you understand what this circle of power actually means and how to build it systematically. Imagine standing in the center of 3 concentric circles drawn on the ground around you. The innermost circle, the one closest to your body, represents everything that is completely within your control. This includes your thoughts, your values, your decisions, your responses to events, and your effort. The middle circle represents things you can influence but not completely control: your health, your relationships, your career success, your children's choices. The outermost circle represents everything that happens regardless of your wishes: the weather, other people's behavior, economic conditions, political events, and natural disasters. Here's where most people create unnecessary suffering for themselves. They spend enormous mental and emotional energy focused on the middle and outer circles while neglecting the inner circle where their actual power resides. You worry about whether your boss will promote you, middle circle, instead of focusing on doing excellent work, inner circle. You stress about your teenager's decisions, middle circle, instead of concentrating on being the kind of parent who creates conditions for good decision-making, inner circle. You lose sleep over political events, outer circle, instead of channeling that energy into living according to your own principles, inner circle. Epictetus, who understood powerlessness intimately from his years as a slave, taught his students a daily practice that can transform your relationship with anxiety. Every morning, spend 5 minutes sorting your current concerns into these 3 categories. Write down what's worrying you, then honestly assess which circle each concern belongs in. You'll likely discover that most of your anxiety is focused on circles 2 and 3, areas where your control is limited or non-existent. Now comes the crucial part. For every concern in your outer circles, ask yourself this question: what aspect of this situation falls within my inner circle of complete control? If you're worried about losing your job, what can you control? Your work quality, your skill development, your professional relationships, your financial planning. If you're anxious about your health, what can you control? Your exercise habits, your diet, your sleep schedule, your stress management, your medical compliance. This isn't about pretending that external circumstances don't matter or that you should become indifferent to outcomes. It's about redirecting your mental energy toward areas where that energy can actually create positive change. Seneca wrote, "What is grief but an opinion?" He meant that our emotional suffering comes not from events themselves, but from our judgments about events and our sense of powerlessness in relation to them. Here's a practical exercise that builds your circle of power daily. Each evening, review your day and identify 3 things you handled well within your inner circle, regardless of the outcomes. Maybe you stayed calm during a difficult conversation, made a healthy choice when you were tempted otherwise, or put genuine effort into a project even though you weren't sure it would succeed. This practice trains your mind to notice and value your actual sphere of influence. The Stoics understood something that modern neuroscience has confirmed. Anxiety often comes from our brain's tendency to rehearse negative scenarios and catastrophize about uncertain futures. But when you consciously redirect your attention to your circle of power, something remarkable happens. Your anxiety doesn't disappear completely, but it transforms from paralyzing worry into productive energy focused on areas where you can actually make a difference. Marcus Aurelius practiced what he called the discipline of desire, training himself to want what was within his power to achieve, rather than becoming attached to outcomes he couldn't guarantee. This doesn't mean lowering your standards or abandoning your goals. It means pursuing excellence in your effort while accepting that results depend on factors beyond your complete control. Understanding this principle of focused control creates the foundation for maintaining emotional equilibrium even when external circumstances become chaotic. 5. How to stay calm when everything feels out of control. You're stuck in traffic on your way to an important meeting, watching the minutes tick by as you sit completely motionless on the highway. Your phone keeps buzzing with urgent messages from work. The radio is broadcasting breaking news about another crisis you can't do anything about. Your mind starts spiraling. I'm going to be late. My boss will be angry. This project might fail. My career could be damaged. What if I get fired? How will I pay my mortgage? Within minutes, you've gone from sitting in traffic to imagining financial ruin. All because you can't control something as simple as the flow of cars around you. This cascade of anxiety when we encounter circumstances beyond our control is one of the most universal human experiences. But the ancient Stoics discovered something profound about maintaining inner calm that can completely transform how you handle these situations. The key lies in understanding what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "Be like the rocky headland on which the waves constantly break. It stands unmoved, and the boiling waters around it fall to rest." Notice that Marcus Aurelius didn't say the waves stop crashing. He didn't suggest that external chaos disappears when you become calm. Instead, he pointed to something much more practical and achievable. You can remain steady while everything around you is turbulent. The waves will keep coming. That's the nature of life, but you don't have to be moved by them. To understand how this works practically, let's explore what the Stoics called the discipline of perception. This is the skill of separating facts from the stories you tell yourself about facts. When you're stuck in traffic, the fact is simple: cars are moving slowly. Everything else, the catastrophic predictions about your career, the angry internal dialogue about other drivers, the mounting sense of panic about being late, these are additions your mind creates on top of the basic reality. Epictetus taught his students to practice what we might call radical present moment awareness. Instead of letting your mind race into imaginary futures or replay frustrating pasts, you anchor your attention in what is actually happening right now. In the traffic example, This means noticing, I am sitting in my car. The traffic is moving slowly. I have music playing. My hands are on the steering wheel. These simple observations might seem trivial, but they serve a crucial function. They interrupt the anxiety spiral and ground you in reality rather than in your fears about reality. But staying calm isn't just about managing your thoughts. It's about managing your energy. Seneca wrote, "Every new thing excites the mind, but a mind that seeks wisdom turns to the proven and the stable." When everything around you feels chaotic, your nervous system can become hyperactivated, constantly scanning for threats and preparing for emergencies that may never come. The Stoics developed specific practices to counteract this biological tendency toward panic. Here's a technique that Marcus Aurelius used regularly, which you can apply immediately. When you notice yourself becoming agitated by circumstances you can't control, take 3 deep breaths and ask yourself this question: what would I do right now if I were committed to responding with complete calm and wisdom? This isn't about suppressing your emotions or pretending everything is fine. It's about choosing your response consciously rather than reacting automatically. The power of this approach becomes clear when you realize that most of what feels out of control in your daily life isn't actually threatening your safety or survival. Your nervous system might react to a delayed flight the same way it would react to a physical attack. But these situations require completely different responses. Traffic jams, long lines, technology problems, schedule changes. These are inconveniences, not emergencies, even though your body might treat them as such. Seneca offered another invaluable perspective on maintaining calm during chaos. He suggested practicing what he called negative visualization, regularly imagining that inconvenient or challenging things might happen, not to invite them into your life, but to reduce their power to upset you when they inevitably occur. If you mentally prepare for the possibility that your flight might be delayed, that your internet might go down during an important call, or that your carefully planned day might be interrupted by unexpected events, these situations lose their ability to throw you into emotional turmoil. This preparation isn't pessimism. It's realism combined with wisdom. The Stoics understood that life is inherently unpredictable and that expecting everything to go according to plan is a recipe for constant frustration. When you accept unpredictability as normal rather than exceptional, you can respond to disruptions with curiosity rather than anger, with flexibility rather than rigidity. The most profound aspect of Stoic calm is that it's not passive. Marcus Aurelius didn't advocate for resignation or withdrawal from life's challenges. Instead, he taught what he called the discipline of action, doing what needs to be done without being emotionally dependent on specific outcomes. You can work diligently for the promotion while accepting that the decision isn't entirely up to you. You can care deeply about your relationships while recognizing that you can't control other people's choices. You can pursue your goals with passion while maintaining equanimity about results. This understanding of calm as active rather than passive naturally leads us to examine how we can strategically change our relationship with the information and influences that often disturb our peace. 6. Transform your daily information diet for inner peace. You reach for your phone the moment you wake up, and within seconds, you're consuming a breakfast of breaking news alerts, social media updates, and urgent notifications. Before you've even gotten out of bed, your mind is already processing information about political scandals, natural disasters, celebrity controversies, and global crises. By the time you finish your morning coffee, you've absorbed more information than most humans throughout history encountered in entire weeks. Yet instead of feeling informed and empowered, you feel anxious, scattered, and somehow hungry for more. This modern phenomenon would have fascinated the ancient Stoics, not because they experienced anything like our digital information overload, but because they understood something profound about the relationship between what we consume mentally and our inner peace. Seneca wrote extensively about the importance of choosing our mental diet as carefully as we choose our physical diet, and his insights are more relevant today than ever. Think about how you approach food. You probably wouldn't start your day by eating candy, drinking soda, and consuming random snacks throughout the day without considering their nutritional value or impact on your health. Yet this is exactly how most people approach information consumption. They mindlessly consume whatever content algorithms serve them, whatever headlines grab their attention, whatever their social networks happen to share, without ever asking whether this mental diet is nourishing their wisdom or simply feeding their anxiety. Seneca distinguished between what he called empty knowledge and useful wisdom. Empty knowledge consists of information that entertains, provokes, or distracts but doesn't actually help you live better. Useful wisdom consists of insights, principles, and understanding that make you more capable of navigating life's challenges with virtue and skill. The problem with most modern media is that it's optimized for engagement rather than wisdom, designed to capture your attention rather than improve your character. Here's where the Stoic approach becomes practical and transformative. Instead of trying to stay informed about everything happening in real time, focus on developing deep understanding of timeless principles that apply across many situations. Marcus Aurelius didn't wake up each morning worrying about the latest drama in the Roman Senate. Instead, he spent time reflecting on fundamental questions. How can I be more virtuous today? What can I learn from yesterday's challenges? How can I contribute something valuable to the world? This shift from consuming information to cultivating wisdom requires what Epictetus called the discipline of desire applied to learning. Instead of wanting to know everything that's happening, you train yourself to want knowledge that actually serves your growth. Instead of feeling compelled to have opinions about every trending topic, you become selective about where you invest your mental energy. Let me suggest a practical framework for transforming your information diet. Start by categorizing your current information sources into 3 types. First, there's junk information, content that provides no lasting value and often increases anxiety without improving your ability to handle challenges. This includes most breaking news, social media arguments, celebrity gossip, and outrage-driven content. Second, there's maintenance information, content you need to function effectively in your work and personal life, such as industry updates, local news that affects your community, and practical knowledge for your responsibilities. Third, there's growth information, content that genuinely expands your wisdom, deepens your understanding, or helps you develop valuable skills. The Stoic approach is to minimize junk information, be efficient with maintenance information, and prioritize growth information. This doesn't mean becoming uninformed about important developments in the world. It means being strategic about how and when you consume information, rather than letting information consumption control your schedule and emotional state. Seneca recommended what we might call batch processing for information consumption. Instead of checking the news throughout the day, designate specific times for staying informed about necessary developments. Instead of scrolling social media whenever you have a spare moment, choose particular periods for social connection. Instead of being constantly available to every urgent notification, create boundaries around when you're accessible to information demands. But the most powerful transformation comes from replacing low-value information with high-value wisdom. When you reduce time spent on breaking news, use that time to read books that have provided valuable insights for decades or centuries. When you limit social media scrolling, invest that energy in learning skills that compound over time. When you stop consuming outrage-driven content, redirect your attention toward understanding principles that help you respond to challenges with wisdom rather than emotion. The ancient Stoics read extensively, but they read for transformation rather than entertainment. They studied history to understand human nature, philosophy to develop wisdom, and practical arts to contribute value to their communities. This type of learning creates what Marcus Aurelius called inner citadel, a foundation of understanding that remains stable regardless of external circumstances. This strategic approach to information consumption naturally prepares us to handle one of life's most consistent challenges: the difficult situations and people that seem designed to test our patience and wisdom. 7. Why difficult situations are actually your teachers. You're standing in line at the grocery store after a long day, looking forward to getting home, when the person ahead of you decides to argue with the cashier about a coupon that expired 3 months ago. The line grows longer behind you. Other customers start sighing and checking their phones impatiently. The manager gets called over, and what should have been a 2-minute transaction turns into a 15-minute ordeal. You feel your jaw tighten, your patience evaporating, and that familiar surge of frustration that makes you want to say something sharp to the inconsiderate person holding everyone up. Now, here's a question that might initially sound absurd. What if this annoying situation is actually a gift? What if this person, this delay, this test of your patience, is precisely what you need to encounter today to become a stronger, wiser, more virtuous human being? This perspective shift represents one of the most counterintuitive yet powerful insights from Stoic philosophy. Marcus Aurelius, who dealt with his share of difficult people and frustrating circumstances as Roman emperor, developed a way of thinking about challenges that completely transforms their impact on your peace of mind. He wrote in his private journal, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." To understand how this principle works practically, let's examine what actually happens in your mind during difficult situations. When you encounter an obstacle, your brain immediately categorizes it as bad or unwanted. This judgment triggers stress responses, emotional reactions, and mental resistance that often cause more suffering than the original problem. You waste energy fighting reality instead of adapting to it skillfully. But the Stoics discovered something remarkable about human psychology. The same situation that feels like a problem can become an opportunity depending entirely on how you frame it. That inconsiderate person in the grocery line isn't just an obstacle to your evening plans. They're also a chance to practice patience. The traffic jam isn't just a delay. It's an opportunity to work on accepting things beyond your control. The difficult coworker isn't just a source of stress. They're a teacher helping you develop the skill of maintaining your composure under pressure. This reframing isn't positive thinking or self-deception. It's based on a sophisticated understanding of how character develops. Seneca explained this principle by comparing virtue to physical strength. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Just as your muscles grow stronger by working against resistance, your patience grows stronger by encountering impatient situations. Your courage develops by facing scary circumstances. Your wisdom deepens by navigating complex challenges. Consider how this works with specific examples from daily life. When someone cuts you off in traffic, you have two choices. You can respond with anger, let the incident ruin your mood, and carry that negative energy into your next interaction. Alternatively, you can recognize this as a moment to practice what Marcus Aurelius called the discipline of perception, seeing the situation as an opportunity to demonstrate grace under pressure, to model the kind of behavior you want to see in the world. The Stoics understood that life presents us with a continuous curriculum designed to develop every aspect of our character. Difficult people teach us patience and compassion. Financial challenges teach us resourcefulness and the difference between wants and needs. Health problems teach us gratitude and the preciousness of time. Professional setbacks teach us resilience and the importance of effort over outcomes. This educational perspective on difficulties serves a crucial psychological function. It transforms you from a victim of circumstances into an active participant in your own development. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What is this situation trying to teach me?" Instead of feeling powerless when things go wrong, you start looking for ways to grow stronger through the challenge. Epictetus, who understood adversity intimately from his experience as a slave, taught his students to practice what we might call obstacle gratitude. This doesn't mean being thankful for painful experiences themselves, but being grateful for the character development that can result from handling those experiences skillfully. Every difficult person you encounter is training you to be more patient. Every frustrating delay is teaching you to be less attached to your agenda. Every disappointment is showing you how to find meaning beyond getting what you want. The practical application of this principle requires what the Stoics called the discipline of desire, training yourself to want the challenges that develop your character rather than only wanting comfortable circumstances. This doesn't mean seeking out problems or being masochistic about difficulties. It means recognizing that the inconveniences, setbacks, and difficult people in your life are not interruptions to your growth. They are the very means through which growth occurs. Understanding this educational aspect of life's challenges prepares us to explore one of the most liberating principles in Stoic philosophy: the nature of true harm and how to protect yourself from it. 8. The ancient secret to never being truly harmed. You're at work when your colleague takes credit for your idea in front of the entire team. Your stomach drops, your face flushes with anger, and you feel a mix of betrayal, humiliation, and rage. Later that day, you're replaying the scene over and over, imagining what you should have said, planning confrontations that will never happen, and feeling your mood spiral downward. By evening, this single incident has ruined your entire day, affected your relationships at home, and left you questioning whether you can trust anyone at work. Here's a question that might sound strange at first. In this scenario, who actually harmed you? Was it your colleague who stole credit for your work, or was it your own response to their behavior? This distinction lies at the heart of one of the most revolutionary insights in Stoic philosophy, and understanding it can fundamentally change how you experience difficult situations for the rest of your life. Epictetus, who knew something about being harmed having lived as a slave, taught a principle that initially sounds almost impossible to believe. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. But he wasn't suggesting that external events don't matter or that you should become indifferent to injustice. Instead, he was pointing to something much more practical and empowering about the nature of true harm. To understand this concept deeply, we need to distinguish between two completely different types of harm. The first type is external harm, damage to your reputation, your finances, your physical comfort, or your circumstances. This type of harm is real, and it's something you should take reasonable steps to prevent when possible. But the second type of harm is what the Stoics called harm to your character, damage to your integrity, your virtue, your wisdom, or your capacity for good judgment. This second type of harm, they argued, is the only kind that truly matters in the long run. Think about it this way. Imagine two people who both lose their jobs unexpectedly. The first person responds with bitterness, blames everyone else for their situation, becomes resentful and withdrawn, and allows the setback to make them cynical about work and relationships. The second person responds with disappointment but also with curiosity about new opportunities, uses the time to develop new skills, maintains their relationships and integrity, and approaches the job search with determination and grace. Both people experienced the same external harm, job loss. But only the first person experienced what the Stoics would call true harm. The second person's character actually grew stronger through the challenge. They developed resilience, discovered inner resources they didn't know they had, and proved to themselves that their worth isn't dependent on external circumstances. This insight becomes even more powerful when you apply it to interpersonal conflicts. When someone treats you unfairly, lies about you, or tries to undermine your success, they certainly can damage your reputation or create inconvenience in your life. But they cannot make you bitter, resentful, or vindictive. They cannot force you to abandon your principles or compromise your integrity. They cannot make you less wise, less kind, or less capable of virtue. These aspects of who you are remain entirely within your control. Marcus Aurelius, who faced countless betrayals and disappointments during his reign, wrote something profound about this principle. How much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, but only to what he does himself. He wasn't advocating for ignoring injustice or becoming passive in the face of wrongdoing. Rather, he was pointing out that your primary responsibility is protecting and developing your own character, regardless of how others choose to behave. The practical application of this principle requires what Seneca called active choice in every situation. When someone cuts you off in traffic, you choose whether to respond with road rage or maintain your composure. When a family member makes a hurtful comment, you choose whether to escalate the conflict or respond with dignity. When you face a professional setback, you choose whether to become discouraged or use the experience as motivation for improvement. This perspective transforms how you handle difficult people and situations. Instead of focusing your energy on trying to control or change other people's behavior, you redirect that energy toward controlling your own response. Instead of allowing someone else's poor choices to determine your emotional state, you maintain sovereignty over your inner life. Instead of letting external setbacks define your worth, you ground your identity in qualities that no one else can touch. The Stoics understood that this principle requires daily practice and conscious awareness. Seneca recommended ending each day by examining your responses to challenges and asking yourself whether you handled situations in ways that strengthened or weakened your character. Marcus Aurelius used his morning reflections to prepare mentally for the difficulties he might encounter and to remind himself that his responses were within his control. The practical application of this principle requires developing what Seneca called the inner citadel, a core sense of self that remains stable regardless of external circumstances. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally numb or pretending that setbacks don't matter. It means recognizing that your deepest source of security and satisfaction comes from who you choose to be, not from what happens to you. When you truly internalize this understanding, you become remarkably difficult to defeat or discourage. External circumstances may challenge you, but they cannot diminish you unless you allow them to compromise your character. This realization provides a foundation of inner strength that no external force can shake. Building on this understanding of true harm, we can now explore how to maintain your highest standards even when the people around you seem to have abandoned theirs. 9. How to keep your standards high when others don't. You're scrolling through social media and watching the news, and it feels like you're witnessing a race to the bottom. Politicians lie openly and get rewarded with higher office. Business leaders cut corners and receive bonuses. People spread misinformation and gain followers. Colleagues take shortcuts and get promoted while you're working late to do things the right way. You start wondering, am I being naive? Should I lower my standards too? Is integrity actually a disadvantage in today's world? This moral confusion represents one of the most challenging aspects of living with virtue in any era, but it's particularly acute in our current moment. The temptation to abandon your principles when others seem to benefit from abandoning theirs is as old as humanity itself, and the ancient Stoics faced this exact dilemma in their own time. Marcus Aurelius ruled during a period when corruption was rampant, when flattery often mattered more than competence, and when doing the right thing frequently brought more problems than rewards. Yet he wrote in his private journal, "Be what you wish others to become." This wasn't naive idealism. It was a sophisticated understanding of how character works and why maintaining high standards serves your long-term interests even when it seems disadvantageous in the short term. To understand why keeping your standards high is actually the most practical approach, let's examine what happens when you compromise your principles for temporary advantage. Initially, it might seem like you're gaining something. Maybe you get ahead faster, avoid conflict, or achieve goals more easily. But the Stoics understood that every compromise of character creates what Seneca called inner debt, a gradual erosion of your self-respect and trustworthiness that compounds over time. Think about this process like physical fitness. When you skip workouts occasionally, you don't notice immediate consequences. You might even feel like you're gaining something, more free time, less discomfort, immediate pleasure. But over months and years, this pattern creates weakness, poor health, and ultimately much more suffering than the temporary discomfort of maintaining good habits. Character works the same way. Each small compromise weakens your integrity, making the next compromise easier and the eventual consequences more severe. Epictetus, who observed human behavior closely during his years as a slave and later as a teacher, noticed something crucial about people who consistently lower their standards. They become trapped in what we might call the degradation spiral. Once you start cutting corners to get ahead, you have to keep cutting corners to maintain your position. Once you start lying to avoid consequences, you need bigger lies to cover the smaller ones. Once you compromise your principles for advantage, you lose the very qualities that could create sustainable success. The psychological cost of abandoning your standards extends far beyond external consequences. When you act in ways that contradict your deepest values, you create what modern psychology calls cognitive dissonance, the uncomfortable tension between your actions and your beliefs. To resolve this tension, you have two choices. Either change your behavior to align with your values, or change your values to justify your behavior. Most people, unfortunately, choose the second option, gradually lowering their standards to match their compromised actions. But there's an even more important reason to maintain high standards regardless of what others do. Your character is the only thing in life that belongs entirely to you. Your reputation can be damaged by others. Your wealth can be lost through circumstances beyond your control. Your health can be affected by factors you didn't choose. But your integrity, your commitment to virtue, your decision to do what's right, these remain within your power regardless of external circumstances. The Stoics called this concept the inner citadel, a fortress of character that no external force can breach unless you open the gates yourself. When you maintain high standards despite others' behavior, you're not just preserving your principles, you're building strength, wisdom, and self-respect that compound over time and create genuine confidence that can't be shaken by external events. Here's where this principle becomes practically powerful in daily life. When you consistently do excellent work regardless of whether others notice, you develop genuine competence and pride in your abilities. When you tell the truth even when lies would be convenient, you build a reputation for trustworthiness that becomes invaluable over time. When you treat people well regardless of their status or what they can do for you, you develop relationships based on mutual respect rather than manipulation. Marcus Aurelius understood that maintaining high standards isn't about moral superiority or judging others. It's about creating the kind of life you actually want to live. He wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." This insight applies perfectly to our current challenge. The best response to people who succeed through compromising their principles isn't to compromise your own principles. It's to demonstrate that success is possible without sacrificing character. This approach requires what Seneca called long-term thinking, combined with short-term courage. In the short term, maintaining high standards sometimes costs you opportunities, requires uncomfortable conversations, or means working harder than people who take shortcuts. But in the long term, this approach creates sustainable success, genuine self-respect, and the kind of reputation that opens doors rather than burning bridges. The practical application involves daily choices that might seem small but accumulate into character. You choose to give credit where it's due even when you could claim it yourself. You choose to admit mistakes rather than covering them up. You choose to help others succeed rather than undermining them for competitive advantage. Each of these choices strengthens your character and builds the kind of person you want to become. Consider the ripple effects of maintaining high standards in a world where others don't. When you consistently act with integrity, you give others permission to do the same. Your behavior becomes a quiet form of leadership that influences people around you to raise their own standards. You become living proof that virtue is possible and practical, even in challenging circumstances. Having established this foundation of personal integrity, we can now explore how to transform the obstacles and setbacks that test these principles into opportunities for even greater growth and strength. 10. Turn every challenge into your greatest growth. You're facing the biggest professional setback of your career. The project you've poured months of work into has been canceled. Your proposal was rejected. Your promotion was given to someone else. You're sitting at your desk feeling defeated, questioning your abilities, and wondering if all your effort was wasted. The voice in your head is relentless. This was supposed to be my breakthrough. This was going to change everything. Now, what am I supposed to do? This moment of disappointment and confusion represents one of life's most crucial crossroads, and how you respond will determine whether this setback becomes a stepping stone or a stumbling block. The ancient Stoics discovered something remarkable about obstacles that can completely transform how you experience every challenge for the rest of your life. What blocks your path forward can actually become the path forward, if you know how to see it correctly. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his private journal during some of the most difficult periods of his reign, captured this principle in one of philosophy's most famous phrases. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. But this wasn't abstract philosophy. It was practical wisdom born from real experience of turning disasters into opportunities for growth. To understand how this transformation works, we need to examine what actually happens in your mind when you encounter obstacles. Your initial response is usually to see the challenge as something blocking you from reaching your goal. The canceled project blocks you from professional success. The rejected proposal blocks you from implementing your vision. The missed promotion blocks you from advancing your career. This perspective creates resistance, frustration, and a sense of being victimized by circumstances. But the Stoics discovered that this initial perception, while natural, is also optional. Every obstacle contains within it the seeds of opportunity, but only if you shift from asking, "Why is this happening to me?" to asking, "How can I use this experience to become stronger, wiser, or more capable?" This shift in questioning changes everything about how you respond to setbacks. Let's explore how this reframing works with specific examples. When your project gets canceled, instead of seeing it as a failure, you can view it as valuable market research that prevents you from investing even more time in an approach that wasn't viable. The experience teaches you about stakeholder management, helps you refine your communication skills, and gives you insights into organizational decision-making that will make your next proposal much stronger. When your promotion is given to someone else, instead of focusing on what you didn't get, you can examine what this situation reveals about your development needs. Maybe you need to build stronger relationships with key decision makers. Perhaps you need to improve your visibility within the organization. Possibly you need to develop skills that weren't apparent to you before. This setback becomes a diagnostic tool that shows you exactly where to focus your growth efforts. Seneca, who experienced dramatic reversals of fortune, including exile and the loss of his wealth, understood that obstacles serve as what we might call character boot camp. Just as physical training requires resistance to build strength, character development requires challenges to build wisdom, resilience, and virtue. He wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Recognizing that growth often requires the destruction of old patterns to make room for new capabilities. The practical application of this principle requires developing what Epictetus called the discipline of perception. When you encounter a setback, pause before reacting emotionally and ask yourself these three questions. First, what specific skills or qualities would help me handle this type of situation better in the future? Second, what assumptions or approaches that led to this outcome need to be questioned or revised? Third, what opportunities does this situation create that wouldn't have existed if everything had gone according to plan? This analytical approach transforms obstacles from sources of suffering into sources of intelligence. Every rejection teaches you something about your market, your message, or your approach. Every conflict reveals something about communication, relationships, or boundaries. Every failure provides data about what works, what doesn't, and what needs to be adjusted. The Stoics also understood that obstacles often redirect us toward paths that are ultimately more aligned with our authentic capabilities and values. Marcus Aurelius initially wanted to be a philosopher, but circumstances forced him into political leadership. This apparent obstacle to his preferred life actually created the opportunity for him to demonstrate philosophy in action, making him one of history's most influential examples of applied wisdom. Consider how this principle applies to your current challenges. That difficult relationship you're navigating is teaching you patience, boundary setting, and empathy. The financial pressure you're experiencing is forcing you to develop resourcefulness, prioritization skills, and a clearer understanding of what really matters to you. The health challenge you're facing is showing you the importance of self-care, the preciousness of time, and the strength you didn't know you possessed. The transformation from victim to student, from obstacle to opportunity, requires conscious practice. Each time you encounter a setback, deliberately look for the growth potential hidden within the challenge. Ask yourself how this experience is preparing you for future success, what qualities it's helping you develop, and what insights it's providing about yourself and your goals. This understanding of obstacles as teachers naturally leads us to explore one final principle that can liberate you from unnecessary mental suffering: the power of strategic detachment from outcomes you cannot control. 11. The superpower of strategic indifference. You're obsessing over a decision that's completely out of your hands. Maybe it's whether you'll get the job after that final interview, whether your partner will say yes to your proposal, or whether your medical test results will come back positive. Your mind churns through endless scenarios, analyzing every possible outcome, replaying conversations, and trying to predict futures that haven't happened yet. You check your phone constantly, lose sleep, and find it impossible to focus on anything else. This mental loop consumes your energy and robs you of peace, even though all your worry changes absolutely nothing about the eventual outcome. This exhausting cycle of mental preoccupation represents one of the most common sources of unnecessary suffering in human life. But what if I told you that you possess a remarkable power that most people never learn to use? The ability to simply have no opinion about things that don't require your opinion. This might sound impossible at first, but it's actually one of the most liberating skills you can develop. Marcus Aurelius discovered this principle during his years as Roman emperor, constantly bombarded with information, opinions, and situations demanding his attention. He wrote in his private journal, "Remember that very little disturbs the wise person's peace of mind. You have the power to have no opinion." This wasn't about becoming apathetic or disconnected from life. It was about becoming strategically selective about where you invest your mental and emotional energy. To understand how this superpower works, we need to examine the difference between helpful opinions and harmful opinions. A helpful opinion leads to useful action, better decision-making, or meaningful engagement with something within your control. When you form an opinion about which job candidate to hire, that opinion guides important action. When you develop a perspective on how to improve your health, that opinion influences beneficial behaviors. When you have thoughts about how to strengthen your relationships, those opinions can lead to positive changes. But harmful opinions are entirely different. These are judgments, reactions, and mental positions about things that don't require your input and won't be changed by your thinking about them. You don't need an opinion about whether the traffic light should have turned green sooner. You don't need a judgment about whether the weather is appropriate for the season. You don't need a position on every political controversy. every celebrity scandal, or every debate trending on social media. The Stoics understood that every opinion you form costs you something. It requires mental energy to maintain, emotional energy to defend, and attention that could be directed toward more productive purposes. When you have strong opinions about things beyond your control, you're essentially volunteering for unnecessary stress and conflict. Epictetus taught his students to practice what we might call the discipline of judgment. Before forming an opinion about any situation, ask yourself these crucial questions. Does this situation require action from me? Will my opinion about this matter influence any decision I need to make? Can I actually affect this outcome in any meaningful way? If the answer to all three questions is no, then you have the option to simply observe the situation without forming a judgment about it. This practice becomes particularly powerful when applied to other people's behavior. You don't need an opinion about whether your neighbor's music is too loud. You either need to address it directly or accept it as part of living near other people. You don't need a judgment about whether your coworker's approach to projects is optimal, or you either need to collaborate effectively or manage your own responsibilities regardless of their methods. You don't need a position on whether your family members' life choices are wise, or you either need to offer specific help they're requesting or focus on your own choices. Strategic indifference doesn't mean becoming passive or uninvolved in important matters. Instead, it means becoming highly selective about which battles deserve your mental energy. Seneca wrote, "Nothing, to my way of thinking, is a better proof of a well-ordered mind than a person's ability to stop just where they are and pass some time in their own company." This ability to stop your mind from constantly generating opinions and reactions is what creates space for wisdom, creativity, and peace. The practical application of this principle starts with developing awareness of your opinion-forming habits. Throughout your day, notice how often you form judgments about situations that don't actually require your input. The slow internet connection, the delayed train, the long line at the store, the political debate on television. All of these situations happen whether you have opinions about them or not. When you catch yourself forming unnecessary opinions, practice what Marcus Aurelius called the view from above. Step back mentally and ask yourself whether this particular judgment serves any useful purpose in your life. Most of the time, you'll discover that the opinion adds nothing valuable while consuming energy you could use more productively. This superpower becomes even more valuable when dealing with criticism, setbacks, or disappointing outcomes. Instead of immediately forming strong opinions about whether these experiences are good or bad, fair or unfair, you can simply observe them as events that occurred and focus your energy on responding skillfully rather than judging extensively. With this foundation of strategic indifference in place, we can now synthesize all these principles into a practical framework for daily living that builds genuine, unshakable strength. Your daily practice for unshakable strength. You now possess 11 powerful principles that can transform how you experience every challenge, setback, and difficult person in your life. But knowledge without practice is just entertainment. The ancient Stoics understood that wisdom only becomes real when it's applied consistently in daily life, when it becomes as natural as breathing, when it shapes your automatic responses to stress and uncertainty. Marcus Aurelius didn't become one of history's most respected leaders by reading about virtue. He became great by practicing it every single day, even when he didn't feel like it, especially when circumstances made it difficult. His private journal reveals a man constantly working to apply Stoic principles to real situations. difficult people, political crises, personal disappointments, and the ordinary frustrations that everyone faces. Your journey toward unshakable mental strength begins with creating what Seneca called daily examination, a simple practice of reflecting on how you applied these principles throughout your day. Each evening, spend just 5 minutes reviewing your responses to challenges. When you encountered information overload, did you guard your mind strategically? When you met difficult people, did you focus on accepting their nature rather than trying to change them? When anxiety arose, did you redirect your attention to your circle of power? This isn't about judging yourself harshly for imperfect responses. The Stoics understood that building character is like building physical strength. It requires consistent practice, patience with setbacks, and celebration of gradual progress. Every time you catch yourself forming an unnecessary opinion and choose strategic indifference instead, you're building mental muscle. Every time you transform an obstacle into a learning opportunity, you're developing resilience that compounds over time. Start tomorrow morning with what Marcus Aurelius practiced. Brief reflection on how you want to embody these principles during the day ahead. Remind yourself that difficult people are statistically inevitable, that your character can only be harmed by your own choices, that every challenge contains opportunities for growth. This mental preparation creates what the Stoics called the inner citadel, a foundation of strength that external circumstances cannot shake. Remember, you're not trying to eliminate all stress, conflict, or disappointment from your life. You're learning to respond to these inevitable human experiences with wisdom rather than reactivity, with growth rather than resistance, with virtue rather than victim mentality. This is the path to genuine freedom, not from life's challenges, but from being controlled by them. The world needs people who can stay mentally strong when others lose their composure, who maintain high standards when others compromise theirs, and who find peace with unchangeable people and situations. By practicing these ancient principles, you become part of the solution to our chaotic times. Subscribe to Stoic Vivu for more practical wisdom from ancient philosophy. Like this video if these principles resonated with you. Share it with someone who needs mental strength strategies. Comment below about which principle you'll practice first. Your engagement helps us reach more people who need this timeless wisdom for modern challenges.